You think you know North Carolina? It's not just the Smoky Mountains and the Old Well. This is Kenan Stadium, where the Jordan Fly Elite game ball makes its debut and its homecoming. Born to fly, built for Carolina, snag your Carolina blue today.
Welcome into a special edition of the Inside Carolina Reaction Show, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com. I am Tommy Ashley. That is Jason Staples with me. Jason, big news breaking tonight. Beau Atkinson, North Carolina defensive end, edge rusher, flat-out stud late in the year last year and expected to be this year, enters the transfer portal. It opens officially at midnight on Tuesday, early Wednesday morning. Jason, this is a tremendous blow for North Carolina's defense.
Enormous. And to put it in perspective, I was on the phone with the great Don Callahan earlier today, this afternoon, before this news broke. And we were talking about the roster and what, he knows his talent. He's getting ready to go full on in the transfer portal. And we were kind of comparing notes of what we thought based on, what was on the roster. And we agreed that the Carolina defense really had, from what we could see in the spring, one, maybe two true difference makers on that defense. Thaddeus Dixon was one that, stood out as a potential guy on that in the secondary. But both of us agreed the one guy that's a true difference maker, especially up front, was Atkinson. And then we both were saying, but that he might well transfer from what we had gathered. And I knew you had gathered that prior to this. We were all kind of waiting with bated breath to find out whether or not that would happen. And sure enough, within a couple hours, he was in the transfer portal. So, I mean, if I were grading the defense and I'm about to go through and do my annual evaluation of the roster, and probably shouldn't start it today because we don't know who's going to be on the roster just yet. But the thing is, if I was going to do that today, Beau Atkinson would have been the top rated player on the defense and by a reasonable margin. So this is an enormous loss.
Jeremiah Holloway has a story on Inside Carolina. Just looking at the numbers, Atkinson broke out second half of, and I'm quoting Jeremiah's story, second half of 24 season, 6.5 of his 7.5 season sacks on the season in the last half. Jason, what I saw on Saturday in the practice or the spring, whatever they wanted to call what we watched in Kenan Stadium, is North Carolina's defensive interior not up to speed, not up to par. North Carolina's edge, with Atkinson being one of those and Melcart being another, potentially game changers. And you mentioned that earlier. Atkinson jumps in the portal. Now, this day and age in the portal, it's the open market, and guys can get out there and see what their value truly is. And your value is what people will pay for you. Whether or not we as reporters or fans agree with that. But Jason, the bottom line is this is the new era in college football, and it leaves a massive hole in North Carolina's defensive roster. And like you said, a game changer. So how do you compensate? How do you possibly compensate for a loss like Atkinson, no matter the reason? And we can debate the reason why he's entering the portal. Doesn't matter. He's entering the portal. How do you compensate for that if you're Bill Belichick and this staff, especially now that you've gone through spring and this portal is opening it up tomorrow?
All things being equal, it's a hard question because you've got the short term and the long term view of this. In the short term, you find out what Atkinson's number is and you pay it. You get him to drop out of the portal, and you keep your best player on defense. The problem with that from a long-term view is if you let that happen and that's your response, you know what's going to happen every year in the portal? Whoever might have some contact with other teams that are willing to maybe tell them that they'd bump the price, you're going to have holdouts on your hands. And I mean, this is exactly what Tennessee with Josh Heupel just went through with Nico Iamaleava, right? They just went through this with a quarterback who was making over $2 million a year and started, nosing around and figuring maybe his value on the open market would be higher. And he decided to, take the negotiating position and try to up his contract. And look, I'm not actually persuaded that he's a top quarterback in college football. If you look at his performance against better defenses last year, it left a lot to be desired. But you can't persuade me that they're actually better at quarterback without him on the roster. But here's the thing. Heupel and Tennessee recognize that if you let that happen, your ability to run your program is done.
And we're not saying that this is a money thing with Beau Atkinson. I'm just saying that if you've got an opportunity to find your value, I think you have to look at it. I think we'll see a lot more people do the same thing. But to your point, this is the dilemma for college coaches now, is that there is nothing to say that anybody on a roster across the country cannot get in the portal, find out what you're worth, and then make a decision. There are many more things that go into these things, though, Jason, and you know as well as I do. Coaching changes matter. Different styles matter. Different coaches matter. Position coaches matter. A lot of people want to look at, when a guy transfers and people say they're soft or they don't want to be coached or all. It doesn't work that way. You've been around college athletes. I have college age children. I know how the mind sort of works, is that it is not all about the money. It is about comfort and a lot of different things for these young men. We may never know what the real reason for Beau Atkinson to get into transfer portal is. Whatever his reasons are, he's certainly got the right. That's the way the system's been set up. But North Carolina's got to learn how to deal with it. And Michael Lombardi and Bill Belichick can paint the golden way with all the money in the world. If all those other things are not where they need to be, then you have a situation where you've got a massive hole in your roster.
Yeah.
And you've got to figure it out.
And the other thing is, if you don't have those other things in ways that are going to, on their own, kind of keep guys on the roster and keep them wanting to stay on the roster and to be in your program, then you're going to have to drastically overpay for guys to be in your program, right? This was the Saban discount at Alabama for the last, decade or so. Everybody pays players. And in the NIL era, once the NIL era began, everybody, the prices were going up. But Alabama was actually paying less than market value for their roster, by and large, because guys it was the Saban discount, within the industry. That was what it's called. Now, we'll see whether Belichick and Lombardi are able to manage a discount on that. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, if Beau Atkinson is not on your roster, you got to go out and find a replacement. And I think Atkinson is the best defensive end in the portal. And I think he's likely to be the best edge player that hits the portal this cycle. You can't just replace that easily then. You're not going to replace it with a guy of comparable quality. It's unlikely that you will. To me, what you've got to do is you've got to go out, and this doesn't change the priorities for you as a program in terms of the guys you need to go after. Coming out of the spring, we decided, we talked about this. I talked about this with Don. I think Don's doing a piece on this soon as well. If I was this coaching staff, my budgetary priorities would be offensive tackle, defensive tackle number 1, offensive tackle number 2, and quarterback would be on that list as well if I could get a guy that's going to be an upgrade over what I have on the roster for next year. I think Baker has enormous potential for the future, but if I want to be able to win in year 1, adding a guy that's a little bit more ready that I think I'm going to be able to win games with now, as opposed to Brown and Baker, those would be the prime positions that I'm investing in. And honestly, even with Atkinson hitting the portal, my prime priority has not changed. I've got to get the interior defensive line, and then offensive tackle and quarterback positions are still the prime priorities. Defensive end, though, is on the list now. If I can add one more quality edge, maybe two more quality edges that are going to be able to kind of help mitigate that loss, then I need to do that. But yeah, this hurts. This hurts really bad. It's never good to lose your best, your most talented, arguably, defensive player. But again, you also can't pursue it you can't beg a guy or overpay a guy to stay if he really doesn't feel like he fits or doesn't want to be there. So this is the dilemma.
Absolutely, it's the dilemma. There was an interesting article on CBSSports.com, and it's out there for folks. It's all over the Inside Carolina message boards about is Carolina underpaying or lowballing offers for portal targets. That remains to be seen. Those type discussions will be had to the end of days, but Beau Atkinson has entered the transfer portal, has announced he's entered the transfer portal, and therefore not on Carolina's roster, leaving a massive hole in that defensive line. To your point, Jason, portal pickups are going to be a big thing. There will be more. Zion Ferguson, a defensive back for North Carolina, at the time of this recording, has announced he's entering the portal. He was a guy that they expected, or at least when he was signed and recruited by Mac Brown, expected to be a player that could make some noise for North Carolina. And that leads me to my last question for you. The difference. I don't think people understand the difference in going from a head coach like Mac Brown to a head coach like Bill Belichick. I don't think, and maybe I'm naive and maybe I don't understand the game, and people say ball is ball, but there's not a bigger difference in style, um, handling, dealing with college age athletes. Belichick and his staff are still learning that, clearly. Are still learning the nature of the beast that is college football and college age players. How big a learning curve, Jason, do you think? Because we talked about this when Belichick was hired. It was like, this is going to be a thing. And if today proves anything, this is going to be a thing, is a thing. So, how big of a learning curve is this going to be for these guys going forward? Because, the way college athletics is, like you said, it's a dilemma. It is a challenge. It is a mess the way things are, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I actually sitting here trying to think of if I could come up with a bigger potential transition from one coach to another than what you would get from Mac Brown to to Belichick. And I don't think I was able to. I'm not sure I could imagine one. You'd have to go historical, right? You'd have to go from you'd have to maybe bring Bear Bryant into the picture or something like that, right? I mean, you're having to go like pre integration stuff to get comparable shifts stylistically from what you're getting from one to the other. And yeah, there's a learning curve. It's not just a learning curve though. It's a matter of like some guys just click with some guys. Some coaches just click better with some players. And sometimes it's just not a great fit. Sometimes it's just as simple as that. And it's not really necessarily anybody's fault. It's just that player relates better to or understands or, is more comfortable with that coach and vice versa. Sometimes it's as simple as that. And one of the things that we've talked about from the beginning on this was Belichick and company are not going to coach in fear of losing guys in the portal. How many times have we talked about that during the spring? Since Belichick has been hired, how many times have we talked about, look, they're coaching in kind of weed out fashion, as opposed to we want to try to make sure that we keep our guys here fashion. And more than once, I can remember you warning, Tommy. I can remember you saying on this very podcast, yeah, well, sometimes, that's going to mean that you're going to lose guys that you really don't want to lose. And we're going to have to be ready for that. I can name at least 3 occasions in which I've been on the podcast and you've alluded to, yeah, there's going to be, this second portal, there's going to be some additions and there's going to be some movement out, and maybe not all guys that Carolina fans and even coaches are going to be happy to see go. You've been on this the whole time, and I know behind the scenes we've been, you were one of the first, maybe the first of us in terms of inside Carolina staff to know that there was a possibility that Atkinson might be one of those guys. So the reality is that this is not entirely surprising, but it does hurt in terms of, my old coach had a very clear recipe when people asked him what the secret to being a great coach was. And he said, well, the secret to being a great coach is having better players than the guy on the other side of the field from you. Like that's the number one secret to being a great coach. And anytime you lose your top personnel, that's gonna hurt. That's gonna make you less of a good coach. So now they've got to go out and they've got to find top quality guys and get them to get on campus. Simple as that.
Simple as that. Fit, money, style. You can't have any bigger difference than it is for North Carolina. Folks wanted change. They've gotten change, but with change comes some things you might not like. And that's what's happened here. Beau Atkinson to the transfer portal. A local kid, a potentially very, very good player. But now he's in the portal.
And a good guy from all
Yes,
accounts. So I mean
absolutely.
a hard worker and a high quality character as well. So this is not a matter of like they've weeded him out, and the coaching staff would like to see him go. I can promise you, he's not a guy that they would like to see in the portal.
Yeah, and for folks that have been around the program and seen the work he's put in to get better, to change his body over the years, you don't get that by just being a guy. You get that by being a very good player. North Carolina will have to handle their business in the portal. That's Jason Staples. I'm Tommy Ashley, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt. Stay tuned to Inside Carolina for plenty of coverage. The next couple of weeks, could be a little bit of the wild, wild west. That's the way the NCAA set it up. North Carolina's done great at retention over the years, but it catches up at some point to every college program. It's just the way it is these days. Everybody stay safe. We'll talk soon.